Hi there, Paul Newsome here from Swim Smooth. This week on the Feel for the Water blog, we're going to ask the question, do you have a dropped elbow that's affecting your catch, or could we really describe this same thing as a high hand? Many swimmers have been taught that they're actually dropping their elbow, and coaches around the world will talk about this idea of having a high elbow, certainly over the top of the water. But that same thing wants to be true underneath the water when you're pulling through. We get all caught up with this idea that the elbow needs to be super high, and that we require a huge amount of flexibility. However, when we look at these two video clips side by side, with a swimmer from the squad versus Michael Phelps, 18 times Olympic gold medalist, we'll actually see that the level of their elbow relative to the height of the water or the surface of the water is not too dissimilar at all. The difference is, though, the hand relative to the elbow. In our Catch Masterclass DVD, which we released in 2011, we were constantly repeating the term fingertips below the wrist, wrist below the elbow. So as your hand pierces into the water there, we should ensure that the fingertips are below the wrist and the wrist below the elbow. Many swimmers, when they reach in, inadvertently reach into the water, stretch forward, and as they do so, this elbow does indeed drop, and that's what the coach or your friend might be seeing from the side. However, the same phenomenon can be described looking at the fingertips relative to the surface of the water and also relative to the elbow. So the big question that we're posing this week, do you actually really have a dropped elbow, or could we describe it simply as a high hand? And most importantly, what do we need to do to rectify that technical issue that you might have, to improve your catch and pull through and improve your general efficiency in the water?
So if we look forward to what's happening up at the front, what's interesting, and believe it or not, the coaches have only been here for 2 video analysis sessions prior to yourself, and both swimmers that we've seen were both doing exactly the same as what you're doing.
Elbows too low?
Elbows too low. Okay. Now, it's interesting that you pick up that terminology, because I've been saying to the last 2 sessions that yes, we could say your elbow is dropped, and we could say the elbow is too low, or we could say your fingertips are too high. It's the same description, it's describing exactly the same thing, but people tend to pull upon this idea of a dropped elbow as a bit of terminology which coaches, typically refer to. Simon's problem is he's dropping his elbow. I would actually say that Simon's problem is his hand is too high. It's the same thing, yes, your elbow is low, but if we look at now Michael Phelps, and he'll be a similar sort of height, potentially build some Phelps in terms of the broadness of the shoulders and size of the hands, etc. If you watch Phelps swimming here, Phelps got a beautiful stroke, of course, 18 Olympic gold medals, he must be doing something right. Watch him from the side. Let's just dive off the block. Amazing dive. Now, if we actually tune into the surface of the water as we've got here with your stroke, let's just draw this line on.
He's out of the water, I'm underneath it.
Well, a little bit of that, but let's look at why you might be looking like you're more underneath it and he's more on top of the water. If we zoom in and we see where his hands reach, look, the fingertips always reach deeper than the wrist and the wrist deeper than the elbow. Relatively speaking, the distance between his elbow and the surface of the water and your elbow and the surface of the water, probably not too dissimilar. The major difference is the fingertips. He's spearing down, you're reaching up. And that might hark back to the days where you might have classified yourself as a bit more of an overglider. Okay, is there anything, have you been sort of trying to lengthen out the stroke a little bit? I mean, you're a tall guy, so you definitely suit a long, smooth stroke.
Yeah, sure, I only ever did swim lessons after year 4 or 5, so primary school, and after that it's just been the only other things that you're seeing your DVD. So I just noticed I was getting that real overglide, but then you kind of talk about, I suppose, trying to engage the
chest and the
chest more, and that was, obviously that's where I picked up. I was
overgliding there a little bit too much, yeah. So, like I say, if we look at Phelps as a carbon copy or perfect copy of what we should be doing, when we're reaching forwards today, I'm actually going to be teaching to spear slightly down. So rather than getting too concerned about the elbow being dropped, what I'm going to get you to try and do is actually just spear that little bit deeper. Now you could look at this and you could say, well, aren't I losing from there to there? But this hand only becomes effective when the palm of the hand becomes rearward facing, which starts to happen about now.
So that's all dead push.
It's all dead push, exactly right. And it's interesting because on the first 50 metres when you're kicking strongly, as you're doing right here, look, any sort of pushing down or braking at the front end of the stroke is compensated by the fact that you're kicking strongly, it's pushing you through that point. But remove the leg kick because you get tired, that's also, it's like a double whammy. That's when we really start to slow down, because you'll still be doing that, you'll still be reaching up. You say you've been sticking at around about 60 strokes per minute. Let's actually look at what stroke rate you're doing on this first lap. It looks...
It's been a couple of years since I've used it.
Oh, is it? Okay, all right. Well, we're going to get you back onto it, but mainly for the pacing side of things. The stroke rate here, to me, just eyeballing, it looks a bit quicker than that, certainly on the first 50 metres. So if we just tune in... No, maybe not. So look. 64. 66. 64. So around about 64. So it's a smidgen higher than what you've maybe been using in the past there. It's not erratically high, it's not erratically low, it's about where it wants to be for your height and build and for your given swimming speed. But if you watch it from the top, let's just have a little look at this bird's eye view looking down. Here we go. Now, somebody who overglides will actually leave this hand extended out in front of the head until the other one catches it up. And once we've started to slow down a little bit, and probably more into the normal swimming that you'd be doing once you've set off quick trying to keep up with the guys, there is a bit of an exchange there, look, where it almost looks like we're doing a catch-up. It's not horrific, I've seen much worse than that, but we will try to refine that up at the front end of the stroke. Part of what's going to help to remove that bit of a delay there with that left hand will just simply be getting the spear deeper with that left hand, so we're not actually pausing and stalling in that position too much. Watch it on the other side. So right hand, as we're going to take a breath, look, that right one is clearly pulling through before the other one even meets it. So that's about the sort of timing that we're looking for. Left hand extends forwards. That's better there, Lau. Look, see how that left one's pulling through as the right one extends forward. So that's definitely passable there, but on occasion that left one just stays out there just that smidgen too long. So there's a little bit of inconsistency, let's call it, in the timing of the stroke from that angle. We can also see how the hands just wrap around a little bit
Going across
in front of the centre line there. Yeah, it's not a massive issue. I like to look for the sort of intersection point. Look, so that one's a lot better. And those two end up sort of crossing each other, maybe about a metre and 20 or something so in front of the head. Ideally, we'd like to see those two lines being as close to sort of parallel as we possibly can. Okay, now it's not all bad at all, Simon. It sounds like I'm picking you to pieces here. If you watch you from the front, you have an exceptionally good catch and pull through. So let's ignore for a moment the fact that we tend to reach up, look, and the elbow drops down. What happens beyond this point starts to get very good here. Everyone see that? Look at that. Excellent. Now that position at the elbow is very good, and you say that you've been working on that a little bit. The angle at the elbow should be somewhere between 100 and 120 degrees. So at 115, it's bang on the money for where it needs to be. If we look at the position of the hand relative to the shoulder, we'll notice that if we took a plumb line straight down through the shoulder there, see how your hand just sits slightly wide of that plumb line? Now, it's not excessively wide. Sometimes people have their hands sort of held way out here, and that would be a bad thing. But one of the things that I've noticed over the years is that people who tend to spend more of their time swimming in the open water than in the pool will tend to favour a slightly wider stance in the water to give you a little bit of stability from when the waves are sort of coming around and swashing around. Now, I know it's fairly sheltered down there in Dunsborough, but I'm sure you've had a few swims out there when it's been a bit rough and choppy.
Yes, but I mean, I'm doing a big chop, but yeah.
So it's going to definitely move you around a lot more than a pool would do. So if I just bring up Olympic gold medalist Rebecca Adlington, and we look at her stance compared to yourself, you can see straight away like her hands are more in line with the shoulder. But on the flip side of that,
so you're not talking about your elbow being in line with the hand.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, the actual bend at the elbow is great.
So,
you've got
that. Where this hand
it's just where that hand. Well, not should be. Let me just emphasise that point so you're really clear on that. So, people who swim in the open water. The point that I'm trying to get across here is that the people who swim in the open water will invariably tend to have a wider stance because you're swimming in disturbed water compared to somebody like Rebecca, who's a pool specialist, who will tend to actually have the hand more directly underneath the shoulder. But if you bring in 7 times world marathon swimming champion Shelley Taylor-Smith, her stance underneath the water is a lot more like yours. And, you know, she's an open water specialist. You can see how she's pulling wider, look?
Yes.
So her hand position looks a lot more like your hand position because she tends to spend that time swimming in the open water. Now, it's one of these things where, so long as it doesn't go crazy wide, that's okay. Experimenting a little bit by bringing it more underneath the shoulder, it might be a good thing, it might not be a good thing. It's something which I'm sort of going to say, look, it's not a major change that you need to look at doing. You might try and change it, and it might not make any difference at all, and it might not improve things at one iota. The bigger difference, though, will be the depth that you're spearing to with that hand, and making sure we're not dropping the elbow at the start, because neither of those two swimmers, Shelley and Rebecca, neither of them drop their elbow at all. If we watch here, look, that's quite a good image there, look.